to Europe now. They used to belong to America, but this is where all the fans are. And this is primarily this in South America are the only places where they're remembered, or not remembered, still active. So I think of them as European characters now. I don't mind that.
So then morally they belong to us.
Yes.
I like that. I think we all say thank you for that.
They morally used to belong to Dell Comics and Gold Key Comics, and now they morally belong to Egmont and maybe the South American publishers. They certainly don't belong to Disney. They never belonged to Disney. Not Karl Barks's characters. Not morally.
Mm. No, I remember I told you, I met you in San Diego 12, 15 years ago, when you were walking around, not even signing anything, just walking around being a fan.
Yeah.
Because there were no fans of Don Rosa at present, which, considering that seeing you here in Europe where the queues are hundreds of meters long, that is just
it's surreal. It's not just weird or strange, it's surreal. And but I think that's good. That keeps me on a level keel. It keeps me from getting too conceited and it also teaches me something about the idea of celebrity, which is totally fictitious. It's all in people's minds. How can somebody be such a big celebrity? Like in Copenhagen, or especially in Finland when I'm doing signings, people, young women stand in front of me and they're trembling like this. And I tell them, relax, it's all in your head. I mean, in America, nobody cares who I am, so why should you?
I'm just a comics artist. Relax.
I tell them I'm just a fan. I never thought of myself as a comics artist. I thought of myself as a fan who somebody mistakenly was allowing to draw comics.
Well, I think most people disagree in that respect. But anyway, I just told people that we're going to go, or head rather straight into talking about Guardians of the Lost Library. And there's some reasons for choosing that story. For my part, that's one of the ones of your stories that I like the most. And I know that there are more people like me who think that this is your best comic.
There's people who actually say that's the best Don Rosa story. There's people who say it's the best Duck story ever done, and there's actually people even like Heidi MacDonald, one of the American comics critic or writer, who says it's the best comic book ever done. And yet, when I created it, I thought it was a dreadful mistake. I didn't like it. I enjoyed doing it, but I thought it was just boring. The ducks went from one city to another, never finding what they were looking for. But that's along with the Life of Scrooge. That's one that people always talk about as being their favorite.
I saw a quote by you saying, and this is a long time ago, but still, you said, "Now I begin to know what Barks must have felt like when people started interviewing him in the 70s about the work he did 25 years earlier." In other words, I don't really recall what I was thinking when I wrote the Guardian story, and I don't recall all the research I did. So, is this discussion, is this going to be weird, or is this going to be okay?
Well, when you said we've done this before, and I don't remember even that.
we actually did this thing in Gothenburg 2 years ago, yeah.
But as soon as you put something up on the screen,
fine. Could you talk about, just to start with, about the origins of this story? Because you were asked to do this.
Oh yeah, this was, let's see, was this while I was doing The Life of Scrooge? I think it was. This was done for Norway. A lot of the stories I did were done for Norway because the editor in Norway had lots of ideas. He was a really sharp guy. He was classically educated, but he found himself as an editor or publisher of Disney comics, but unlike some other editors in those days at various Egmont branches, he was like Karl Barks in the sense that he had a job that might not have been prestigious with his colleagues, but he was going to do the best job he could at it. That's what made Karl Barks so good. And Karl Barks's day, doing comic books was hack work. That's what failed people did. The successful people wanted to be working in newspaper comics, where there was a lot of money. You could own your characters in newspaper comics, and he wanted to be doing newspaper comics, sort of comedy adventures with human beings, but he found himself doing Donald Duck stories, and even though that was considered hack work, he had the old-fashioned American work ethic, that was his job, and he was going to do the best job he could, if just for his own self-respect. And that's why his comics were so good, even though and other comics done at the same time were I mean, I wonder why people in America, they call it the golden age of comics, back in the 30s and to the mid to late 40s. Those were awful comics, I think. They had some brilliant ideas, you know, the original ideas like the superheroes and so forth. And then there was Will Eisner, but he did his great work for the newspapers. The spirit was in the newspapers, not in the comic books. Reprinted in the comic books. But that was just hack work. People didn't want to be doing that. And then what I call, if it was up to me to call the golden age of comics, what used to be in America called the atomic age of comics, which would be after the atomic bomb or the end of World War II until 1956, where they start the Silver Age, they call it, with the rebirth of the Flash. We called that the atomic age, and that's when I think is the true golden age of comics, because that's when the kids who were kids back in the 30s and early 40s and reading the comic books that they were buying that were just newspaper reprints or semi-hack work by people who really didn't want to be doing them, that's when they were old enough to start doing comic books. And that's what caused things like EC Comics. These were all like 20-year-old guys who'd grown up 15 years earlier on Alex Raymond and all the great newspaper comic strips. And they respected comic books. They loved them, and they were people who did their best work in comic books. I guess they were like me. They were fans. They didn't care that it might not pay much, but they just loved doing it. It was fun. And they liked impressing each other. They were working for, Wally Wood and Jack Davis, and they were trying to impress Frank Frazetta. They were trying to impress each other. Probably not thinking so much about the readers as all the other people who worked at EC, but that was the golden age of comics to me. And Barks, and he had started back in the earlier days, but he hit his best stories in those same years of the early 50s. But they put it back in the Hall of Fame edition and so on. Again, see, I wish we were looking at the Swedish edition. I want to know what was written on the door. Because that really challenges the translator, and of course you had an excellent translator here in Sweden, and I just like to know what expression he came up with.
What Stefan came up with.
Yeah.
Did you think about this, that you wouldn't be able to use the Junior Woodchucks of the World symbol in the international editions? Did that come into your mind when writing this?
It did, but I didn't care, because, after all, one of the first stories I did for Egmont was, again, The Return to Xanadu, which was based, there was lots of references, well, the whole title was a reference to an English poem, but that was, I'm doing the stories for myself, not for the publisher, and I'm American, and so I just hope the foreign translators can make something out of it, but I knew my story was my story, and that's the story. That's the only story I can tell.
But you're not making life easy for the translators.
I know. They told me, in fact, the editor told me I'm not supposed to make life easy. I shouldn't worry about it. I remember that now. They said, you got to make them work, because if you have a really good joke in the thing like that, or a pun or something, that makes them work. They're challenged.
True.
They have to come up with something just as good.
Well, I think Stefan has said that
he might have told
your
me
comics takes about twice the amount of time that any other Disney comic takes. So. But he still appreciates the job. So.
Yeah.
And then the last panel here, you say that Scrooge is too old to be even a senior woodchuck. And it says that the age limitation you probably surpassed.
Sorry. The turn of the century.
The turn of the century. That squarely puts this in the 1950s, and that's something you've been doing all the time.
Yeah.
Can you say something about that?
Well, that's I obviously do stories based solidly on Barks. That's all I was interested in doing, and for the character to be alive in the years I was in, 1989 when I started, 87, or all through the 90s. For him to have done all the things Barks said he did, he'd have to be like 140 years old. That's one reason, but the main reason was I read the comics in the 50s, or looked at them even before I could read, and I wanted to set the comics in the years that I was reading them. Again, it was just a personal, just for fun. And the editor would, he couldn't stop me from doing that. You know, I never put any modern inventions. I never put cell phones or skateboards or telephones were always old-fashioned telephones, and they couldn't come up with a reason to prevent me from doing that. Sometimes they changed the dialogue. That would be, and I wouldn't know if they were changing the dialogue or not. But anytime I put a year somewhere, unless I hit it, they'd spot it and correct it. Or if and it would get tricky when I'd say something happened 550 years ago, and I'd get the Egmont comic, and suddenly it would be like 500 years ago instead of 500, and I'd complain about that. But I just wouldn't put a year any place. But like I said, I'd hide it someplace. So yeah,
but you went on strike sometime to make sure that you got more say on how your comics were treated.
Years later. That was much later.
Mm. But that was
But
to get control of how your comics were treated in other countries.
It just, yeah, but let's not talk about that.
All right,
That's
all right. Fair enough.
the depressing part.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm thinking about the research I still do. Right now, both Fantagraphics in America and in France, a very prestigious publisher, very similar to Fantagraphics.
Mm-hmm.
Fantagraphics is a very prestigious publisher who has very low circulation because Americans don't like quality comics. Mm-hmm. And in France, it's the opposite. It's a very prestigious publisher who does excellent work, but the French appreciate it, so it's a hugely successful company. They're both doing a Don Rosa library, similar to more like the Hall of Fame. You talk about that Don Rosa collection in Europe, in most of Europe. These gigantic books, huge elaborate things, and it tells my life story, photos of me when I'm a child, and follows me growing up, showing houses I lived in. Fantagraphics, when they told me they were going to do a Don Rosa library, I said, okay, but this Don Rosa collection in Europe, don't do that. Please don't do that. Because in America that would look so absurd. People would see this at the book stand, these like a $900 book set. And say, who the hell is Don Rosa? They haven't done anything like that for Will Eisner or Jack Kirby. That would be humiliating to see. That'd be a laughing stock. But so they're doing the English version of the Hall of Fame, like the Don Rosa Light version. But anyway, they're doing that in France, and they're doing it in. And I'm just thinking, I have to go through every panel, every page, every color, and I have the right to finally tell them exactly how to color things. And I just looking at this page, I not very long ago had to research the color of soccer outfits in Alexandria to make sure. And I had to. I think the next page I had to check on the color of soccer. What do they have? Umpires or referees?
Yeah.
And I had to. I think that might have been the dark blue is accurate. But I mean, I don't know from soccer, so or football, whatever you want to. We have to call it soccer because we already have football. What else about this? This coloring's nice, like how they do the green glow in the borderless panel. At least they didn't color the ducks. If they hadn't done that, they might have colored the ducks blue because. Oh, I remember a soccer ball up there in the top. Damn, it's hard to draw a soccer ball. That's why it bounced out of the panel right away. I didn't want to have to draw it again.
I like it when looking back at these two pages.
Go back again. I see things that I've forgotten about, like the dog digging dirt over on the umpire.
Yeah.
I do little things like that. I don't know if that's good. That's more like it belongs in a Mad comic or something. It's too surreal. But I grew up on Mad comics too, so.
I was going to say I like the fact that when we reach the arena here,
Yeah.
and you draw these footballers,
Yeah.
soccer players, and they're Egyptians, I assume, but you're not making them very much of a caricature of Arabs, or they look like normal Disney dog characters.
No, now you're talking about something I don't remember. What I intend to do, I think they should have had darker skin, maybe. And I have to go through because they're very politically correct when they color different ethnic types. And I tell them that it wouldn't hurt if the Indians and the Hindu Indians are a darker skin. Nobody's going to complain about that. They probably like it.
But what I mean is that it's difficult to do these kind of caricatures.
Yeah.
And it's easy to be attacked for that. If you do...
Well, it's easy to be tactful because I can't draw, I don't know how to draw an ethnic type. I remember, makes me think of the time I was drawing some tigers on for a Gladstone cover. And I don't know how to draw animals. Don't have any experience. I can draw general snazzy, sure, but I remember the people at Gladstone told me the tigers I drew looked like werewolves. And I said, yeah, they do, sir. I don't know how to draw a tiger. So I don't know how to draw. So maybe these were visiting teams from Duckburg doing an exhibition match. I don't know what else to do. See examples of original art over at the gallery. Yep.
He has a question here. There is about how long does it take to write like one of the books, like the Hall of Fame?
To write what?
The books.
The whole book?
The Hall of Fame, yeah. How long?
Well, no, they assemble the books. I just do individual stories, which were in the weekly comics. And the Hall of Fame books were collections of those stories that would appear, 3 or 4 times a year. So I didn't do the books. Were anthology, were collections. So maybe your question is, how long does it take to do a story?
Yeah.
All right. I do long and short stories, but I think I calculated it once. I both research it, because I do the whole job. I'll research it, and then I will write out the the first thing is after I research it, and I think I know what the story is going to be about, is I would take sheets of I don't know what you call it now. We used to call it typewriter paper, but you don't have typewriters anymore, so now I guess you call it copier paper. And I don't know what size A. We don't have that measurement in America. A3, A2. Anyway, sheets of paper, and I would like thumbnail sketches. So I plot out how many pages I need. I know what was going to happen on each page, and then I would write it all out in a notebook, all the dialogue, and then the next step was I'd get again those typewriter sheets, and I do like a mock-up. I don't know how anybody else did comics. I never learned. I just know how I find out. Maybe I should go to one of your classes and find out.
We can do that.
And then I do what was pretty just full-size mock-ups of the page with all the dialogue written out, and then quick sketches of the characters and the positions and the expressions, so the editor can see the story. One thing I did wrong, what I guess you teach, is the proper way to do it is first you pitch the idea to the editor, and he said, like this, I'm going to do a story about the library at Alexandria. Okay. The next thing you do is tell the editor the general plot. He'd say, okay. And the next thing you do is, I don't know, write out a first draft. And he'd say, okay. And then you'd write out the final draft. And he'd say, that's not how I did it, because that would be a boring way to do it. I wanted to present it to Byron Erickson, my editor, as a finished story. So I would do the whole thing from start to finish, and the first he'd see of it, without even knowing what the story was going to be about, were these mock-up pages, which were just like this, only sloppy. And that because it wouldn't be any fun otherwise. I wanted him to be like the first reader of the comic. And that worked okay for me, except maybe twice when he'd reject the whole thing. And so I'd be like 4 weeks of work shot. Because again, I'm not doing it worrying about being paid. I'm doing it just because I'm having fun telling him a story and telling myself a story. Anyway, how long does it take? I think I calculated it out once, because I do it all gradually. After he's okayed it, then I pencil the entire story, and then I ink the entire story. So it's done in increments, but it came out to about a half a page a day. So at 30, this page, if this is about 30 pages, that would take me 60 days. There's 5 work days a week, so 5, 10, 15, that's like 4 months. It would take me 4 months to do this story of intense work, and the reader reads it in 15 minutes. And I think that the reader should take 4 months to read it. I would say. Yeah, they'll read it. But then somebody pointed out that, but there's lots of readers, and they each take 10 or 15 minutes. There's millions of readers that might come out to 40 years altogether. And I'd say, well, I guess I should be happy they don't expect me to take 40 years to write and draw because the pay isn't that good. Well, it was about half a page a day.
One more question, I'm sorry, but we have to close off with that. That's for you.
Yes, I was just wondering, is there any like historical occurrence or legend or treasure or something that you wish that you had written about that you haven't?
That's a good question. I had my notes. I've still got notes somewhere when I would, write down ideas. I can't remember. I can't remember any. But that makes me think of. In lieu of an answer to that, somebody asked me if there was a Barks. Since I don't have an answer to that question, yesterday somebody asked me if there was a Barks sequel that I wanted to do and that I didn't do, and there was one, and that they asked for, and I started on it. The sequel to the Golden Fleecing. That was the story where the harpies, or in the original American version, they had to call them larkies because harpies was some sort of reference to prostitutes or something, or a shrill woman, so they called them larkies. Anyway, it was based on Greek legends and mythology, and I wanted to do that was one of my favorite stories when I was a kid. And I started on that story, doing research, and I found that I just couldn't do the harpy characters the way Barks did. It was kind of a farce. And they were such awful 1950s type female stereotypes. And it was so silly that I still love the story, but I just couldn't bring myself to do a sequel to it. I just couldn't write those characters. But I don't remember, I think I pretty much covered all the treasures that I knew about. People are always asking me about Oak Island treasure. Has anybody ever heard about that? Yeah. It's boring, that's why I never did. You can go look up, Google the Oak Island treasure. It's an interesting story, but it would make it boring. Comic book story.
Well, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to stop this. So,
I hope that was interesting.
Thank you very, very much.